At 2:13 in the morning, I opened my door expecting silence. Instead, a soaked, shaking man stood under the porch light and said, "You don't know me, but my mother stole everything from you." 30 years earlier, my sister vanished with $310,000 and broke my life in half. Now, her homeless son was standing at my door, carrying a truth I'd buried for decades. The knock was so soft, I almost ignored it. It was the kind of knock people use when they're not sure they're welcome, when they already expect rejection. I was half asleep, standing in my hallway in old sweatpants, annoyed more than curious. No one ever came to my house that late. No one ever came at all. The rain outside was loud, hammering the roof like it was angry at the world. When I opened the door, the porch light flickered. And that's when I saw him, thin, drenched, hair plastered to his forehead. His shoes were falling apart and he smelled like cold rain and exhaustion. He looked about 30, maybe a little older, but his eyes had the heaviness of someone who had lived far too long without rest. He swallowed hard before speaking. "I'm sorry," said. "I didn't know where else to go." I stared at him, my hand still gripping the door. "Do I know you?" He shook his head slowly. "No, but you knew my mother." Something in my chest tightened. "Who was your mother?" He hesitated. Like saying the name out loud might shatter him. "Lily." The world tilted. The rain faded into a dull roar. 30 years collapsed into a single heartbeat. I hadn't said that name out loud in decades. My sister Lily had been 2 years younger than me, reckless in ways I never allowed myself to be. Loud where I was quiet, emotional where I was careful. Growing up, it was always me cleaning up after her, making excuses for her, lending her money I couldn't afford to lose. And every time she'd hug me and say, "You're the only one who understands me." When she got pregnant at 23, the father disappeared before the baby was even born. Lily showed up at my apartment with a suitcase and swollen eyes, and I let her stay without asking a single question. I told myself that was what family did. Her son was born on a humid summer morning. I held him in my arms, terrified I'd drop him, amazed by how something so small could feel so heavy with responsibility. Lily laughed and said, "You're going to be his favorite uncle." Believed her. Years later, when I sold my small tech company for more money than I'd ever seen in my life, Lily was the first person I told. She cried, hugged me, said she was proud of me. I was careful by nature, but with her, I let my guard down. I trusted her in a way I'd never trusted anyone. "I just need help moving the money for a bit," I told her. "Until I figure out investments, you're good with paperwork." She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'd never hurt you." 2 weeks later, my account was empty. $310,000 vanished like it had never existed. The bank showed me the transfers, each one authorized, each one bearing my digital signature. I felt sick. I called Lily over and over until my phone battery died. No answer, no reply. I drove to her apartment that same night. The door was unlocked. Her furniture was gone. Her clothes were gone. Her son's toys were gone. All that remained was a dusty outline on the carpet where the couch used to be and a single crayon rolling on the floor. That was the night I learned how betrayal feels in the body. It's not just emotional, it's physical. Your stomach twists. Your hands shake. Your thoughts fracture into pieces that don't fit together anymore. I kept thinking there had to be a mistake. Lily wouldn't do this. Not to me, but she had. And she never came back. The police told me it was a civil matter. The lawyer told me it would cost more to chase her than I'd ever recover. Friends told me to let it go. Family told me to forgive. None of them lost everything overnight. I lost more than money. I lost my sister. I lost my nephew. I lost the part of myself that believed loyalty was enough to protect you. I rebuilt my life the way you rebuild after a fire, carefully, with distance, with no room for sentiment. I moved cities. I worked until exhaustion became normal. I learned How to live alone without admitting that's what I was doing. I never married, never had kids. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself I was fine with that. But there were nights quiet, dangerous nights when I wondered what happened to her son, if he was safe. She'd told him the truth. If he hated me for disappearing, just like she had. I shut the door on those thoughts the same way I shut the door on everything else that hurt. Until now. The man on my porch shifted his weight nervously. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Just for a minute." I should have said no. Every instinct screamed at me to protect myself. But my body moved before my mind caught up. I stepped aside and let him in. The warmth of the house hit him immediately. He shivered, rubbing his hands together. I handed him a towel without thinking. He took it like it was something sacred. "Sit," I said, gesturing to the kitchen table. We sat across from each other, the space between us thick with words neither of us knew how to say. Up close, I saw the curve of his nose, the way his eyebrows furrowed when he was nervous. Lily's face softened by time and hardship. "My name is Ethan," he said quietly. I nodded once. "I know who you are." His eyes widened. "You do? I held you when you were a baby." His jaw tightened. "She told me about you. Not everything, just that you were gone." "Gone," I repeated. The word tasted bitter. "She died." 2 years ago," he said suddenly. The sentence landed harder than I expected. I felt something break loose in my chest, something I didn't know I was still carrying. Anger, grief, relief, everything tangled together. "How?" Lee asked. "Cancer." He looked down at his hands. "She got sick fast." By the end, she talked a lot about regrets. Silence stretched between us. "She told me what she did," he said. "About the money. About you." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. So she finally said it out loud. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a worn envelope. My name was written on it in handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. "My sister's. She wanted you to have this," he said. "But she never knew where you were." I didn't open it. I just stared at it, 30 years pressing against my ribs. "I didn't come here for money," he said quickly, panic creeping into his voice. "I know you don't owe me anything. I've been sleeping in shelters, sometimes outside. And when she told me your name, I thought maybe you'd at least hear me out." I looked at him, really looked at him. This wasn't Lily. This wasn't betrayal. This was the aftermath of it. "Do you have anywhere to go tonight?" I asked. He shook his head. "No." I stood up, my legs unsteady. "You can stay, just for tonight." His eyes filled with tears. He tried desperately to hide. "Thank you," he whispered. As I showed him the guest room, I had the strangest thought. The money was gone forever. But the story wasn't finished yet, and that terrified me more than the knock ever did. That night, after I showed Ethan the guest room, I stood alone in the hallway for a long time. The house felt different with another heartbeat inside it, like the walls themselves were confused. I hadn't shared this space with anyone in years. I was used to silence-controlled, predictable silence. Now, there was the faint sound of the shower running, the soft thud of footsteps that didn't belong to me. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the envelope he'd given me. My sister's handwriting looked smaller than I remembered, shakier, like even the letters were tired. For 30 years, I'd imagined what I'd say if I ever saw her again. I'd rehearsed angry speeches in my head, sharp enough to cut. All of that was useless. She was gone. All that remained were words on paper and the son she left behind. I didn't open the envelope right away. Instead, memories came uninvited. I remembered Lily as a teenager, sneaking out at night, dragging me into lies I didn't want to tell. I remembered bailing her out when she wrecked my car, when she maxed out her credit cards, when she cried. On my couch, swearing she'd change. I remembered how convincing she could be when she wanted forgiveness. How she always made herself sound like the victim of bad luck instead of bad choices. And remembered the exact moment I realized she wasn't. Coming back, it was 3 months after the money vanished. I'd been calling hospitals, shelters, anyone who might have seen her. One night, I got a call from an unknown number. My heart nearly stopped. But it wasn't Lily. It was a woman who said she'd bought my sister's old phone at a pawn shop in another state. She was calling to see if I wanted it back. That was the moment I understood. Lily hadn't disappeared in panic. She'd planned it. The bitterness of that realization stayed with me for years. It shaped how I saw people, how I trusted or didn't. I told myself I was smarter now, tougher. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid of being fooled again. The shower stopped. Footsteps moved down the hallway. Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair damp, wearing clothes I'd dug out of a storage box. They were old, but clean. "Sorry," he said. "I hope that's okay. It's fine," I replied. "Sit." He hesitated, then sat across from me again. The envelope lay between us like a loaded weapon. "You don't have to read it," he said quietly. "I know," I answered. "But I will." I opened it carefully. Inside were several folded pages, yellowed with age, and a smaller envelope stuffed with documents, bank printouts, old receipts, evidence of guilt preserved like a wound that never healed. The letter was dated just months after she vanished. "Dear brother, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know I wasn't trying to destroy you. I was drowning. I thought I could fix everything if I just had enough money. I told myself I'd pay you back before you even noticed. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Don't expect you to understand. I just hope someday you'll know I hated myself for what I did." My hands shook as I read. I felt anger flare hot, familiar, but beneath it was something worse. Grief for a conversation that would never happen. She'd written more about running, about fear, about dragging a child through instability because she was too proud to admit she'd ruined everything. She admitted the gambling, the debts, the people she owed. She wrote that she tried to save money for me, but every time she did something, pulled it away again. At the end, she wrote about Ethan. "He's a good boy. Better than me. If he ever finds you, please don't punish him for my sins." I closed the letter and stared at the table. Ethan watched me anxiously, his fingers twisting together. "She wasn't a monster," he said carefully. "I know what she did was unforgivable. But she talked about you like you were the one good thing she'd ever had." I looked up at him. "Did she ever try to contact me?" He shook his head. "She was ashamed. She thought you'd call the police or scream. Or worse, look at her with nothing in your eyes." I laughed bitterly. She wasn't wrong. Silence settled again. This time it wasn't hostile, just heavy. "Where have you been staying?" I asked finally. "Wherever I can," he said. "Shelters when there's space, sometimes friends, sometimes nowhere." "How long?" "Almost a year." Something twisted in my chest. "And before that?" He shrugged. "We moved a lot. She tried. She really did. But things always fell apart." I believed him, could hear the truth in his voice, the exhaustion of someone who'd been surviving. "Not living. You can stay here for now," I said. "We'll figure things out." His eyes widened. "You don't have to, I know," I interrupted, "but I'm choosing to." That night, after he went back to the guest room, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, my thoughts weren't circling the same old wounds. They were moving forward, uncertain and frightening, but alive. In the days that followed, we fell into an awkward rhythm. He woke early, trying not to be a burden. He cleaned without being asked. He offered to cook, though his skills were questionable at best. I watched him carefully, waiting for signs of entitlement, manipulation, anything that looked like Lily. They never came. Instead, I saw discipline, humility, a quiet determination to prove he wasn't here to take anything from me. One evening, as we ate a simple dinner, he said, "I'm looking for work." "Anything. You don't need to rush," I told him. "I do," he replied. I don't want to be someone you regret helping." The words hit harder than he intended. I realized then how deeply my sister's shadow loomed over him. He was living with the weight of her choices, afraid he'd be judged before he ever spoke. "You're not her," I said firmly. He looked down. "I know. But people don't always see that." I understood that more than he knew. Weeks passed. He got a job stocking shelves at a grocery store. He came home exhausted but proud, holding his first paycheck like proof he belonged in the world. I felt something unfamiliar stirring, something dangerously close to pride. One night, he asked, "Do you hate her?" The question caught me off guard. I considered lying. Instead, I told the truth. I hated what she did. I said, for a long time, I hated her too. But hate is heavy. You carry it long enough, and it becomes part of you. And now I paused. "I'm tired of carrying it." He nodded slowly, like that answer mattered more than I realized. But forgiveness, I was learning, isn't a single decision. It's a series of tests. And the hardest one was still coming, because loving someone connected to your deepest wound forces you to reopen it. And I wasn't sure yet whether I was strong enough to do that without breaking all over again. Time has a strange way of sneaking up on you when you're not watching it. Days with Ethan slowly stopped feeling like an interruption and started feeling like routine. Mornings became shared coffee in quiet comfort. Evenings became short conversations about work, about things neither of us said out loud. The house no longer echoed the way it used to. It breathed. That scared me more than the knock ever did, because comfort makes you careless. And carelessness had once cost me everything. I tried to stay distant. I told myself this was temporary, that he would save some money, find his footing, and move on, that this was charity, not family. But the lines blurred whether I wanted them to or not. One afternoon, I came home earlier than usual and heard voices in the living room. I froze, instinctively tense. Ethan was on the phone, his back turned to me. "I know." He was saying quietly, "I told you I'm working. I can't just leave. I don't have money like that." There was a pause. His shoulders stiffened. I said no. He ended the call and turned around, startled to see me. "Sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to. Who is that?" I asked. He hesitated for just a second too long. "An old acquaintance." That word, acquaintance. It was the same word Lily used whenever trouble followed. I didn't push. I nodded and went to my room, but something inside me tightened. That familiar old warning bell started ringing, faint but insistent. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed everything I knew, everything I'd ignored back then. Lily's half answers, her vague explanations. How badly I'd wanted to believe her. In the early hours of the morning, I got up and went to the kitchen for water. Ethan was sitting at the table in the dark, elbows on his knees, staring at nothing. "Can't sleep?" I asked. He flinched. "Slightly, sorry. I'll go back to bed." "No," I said. "Stay." He exhaled and sat back in the chair. The streetlight outside cast shadows across his face, making him look older, worn. "Something going on?" I asked. He swallowed. "I didn't want to worry you. Try me." He rubbed his hands together. "My mom had debts. Not just gambling. People who don't forget. One of them found me. Felt colder. Found you how?" She kept. "Records, names, places. I guess they tracked me down." He looked up at me then, fear naked in his eyes. "They want money. Said if I don't pay, they'll come back." "And you thought hiding this was a good idea?" I snapped, sharper. "Then I meant to. I didn't want you involved," he said quickly. "You've already lost enough because of her." The words landed hard. I stood there, torn between anger and something dangerously close to panic. "How much?" I asked. He shook his head. "Doesn't matter. I'll handle it." I laughed, bitter and short. "That's exactly what she said." He winced, like I'd slapped him. I'm not her, he said quietly. No, I replied, forcing myself to breathe. You're not. But this situation feels the same. Silence stretched between us, thick with history neither of us had lived together, but both of us carried. Are they threatening you? I asked. Yes. Have they come here? He said quickly, and I won't let them. Something shifted then. A line crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. You should have told me, I said. This house is my responsibility. I know, he whispered. I just didn't want to be another burden. That word again, burden. I realized then how deeply my sister had damaged him. He measured his worth by how little trouble he caused. How invisible he could make himself. We'll deal with this, I said finally. Together. His eyes widened. You don't have to. I'm aware, I replied. But I'm choosing to. The next few weeks were tense. I installed cameras without explaining too much. I changed my routines. Old instincts, resurface control, preparation, distance. Ethan noticed but didn't comment. He worked longer hours, came home exhausted. Tried to be smaller. One evening I found him sitting on the back steps, head in his hands. They came to my job, he said before I could speak. Didn't do anything, just wanted me to know they could. That was it. I called a lawyer the next morning, not about the old money, about protection, about restraining orders, about documentation, about doing things the right way, not the desperate way Lily had done them. When I told Ethan, he looked stunned. Why would you do that? For me, I met his gaze. Because someone should have done it for her. And because you deserve better. He didn't speak, just nodded, his jaw tight. The legal process was slow, frustrating, and expensive. But for the first time in decades, I didn't feel powerless. I felt involved, engaged, protective. 1. Night after weeks of tension, Ethan came home with a strange look on his face. They stopped calling. He said, stopped. I asked, they said they'd been contacted. That it wasn't worth the trouble. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That night, something broke open between us. We sat in the living room, the TV off, the quiet, heavy, but not. Hostel, she was scared all the time, Ethan said suddenly. My mom. She acted tough, but at night she'd sit on the edge of the bed and stare at the wall. I used to think it was my fault. I didn't interrupt. She loved you. He continued in her way. She talked about you when she thought I was asleep. Said you were the only person who ever believed in her. I closed my eyes. Believing in someone doesn't save them. No, he agreed softly, but it matters. I looked at him then, really looked at him, and something inside me finally gave way. I missed you, I said. Even when I didn't know you? His breath hitched. I wondered about you my whole life, if you hated me. I never knew you well enough to hate you, I replied, but I did wonder. He wiped at his eyes quickly, embarrassed. I don't want to mess this up. Neither do I said. That was the moment I understood something crucial. Forgiveness wasn't about my sister anymore. It was about whether I was willing to risk being hurt again to build something new. Weeks turned into months. Ethan saved money, paid rent without reminders. Enrolled in night classes. Slowly, carefully, he built a future that didn't depend on running. One afternoon, found myself doing something I hadn't done in years. Was smiling for no reason. It startled me, because joy, when you've lived without it for so long, feels suspicious, like a trick. But it wasn't a trick. It was earned. Slowly, unevenly. Honestly, still, a question lingered, unspoken but heavy between us. What happens next? Because at some point, temporary becomes permanent. And permanence demands a choice. I wasn't sure yet what I would choose, but I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer living in the aftermath of my sister's betrayal. I was living in the consequence of her one good legacy, and that scared me, almost as much as it healed me.